Two children, same age, same country, both loved deeply by their parents. The first child drops her cup of water at breakfast. It spills across the table. Her father pauses, watches, and waits. She stares at it for a moment, then slides off her chair, walks to the counter, pulls a cloth from the drawer, and wipes it up. Her father nods and goes back to his coffee. The second child drops his cup. Before it even stops rolling, his mother is already there, cloth in hand, apologizing on his behalf to no one in particular, refilling the cup, checking if he's okay. Both moments are quiet. Both parents are present. Neither child was in danger. But by age 5, these two children will have measurably different brains, different emotional wiring, different relationships with confidence, fear, and the world. And it all started with one difference in how their parents responded to the same moment. Independent parenting, sometimes called autonomy supportive parenting, is less about stepping back and more about trusting forward. In the morning, the child gets dressed independently, even if the shirt is on backwards. The parent notices and says nothing, or maybe says, "Does that feel right to you?" At the playground, when the child falls and looks up to check the parent's reaction, the parent holds a calm expression, a small smile, a nod, and the child decides, on their own, whether to cry. When the child refuses to eat dinner, the parent says, "Okay." The kitchen closes in 20 minutes and means it. Overprotective parenting comes from the same place all good parenting does, love. And it often looks identical on the surface. In the morning, the parent dresses the child because it's faster, because the shirt matters, because they're running late. At the playground, the parent rushes over the moment the child stumbles, voice already raised in concern, scanning for injury before the child has had a chance to assess themselves. When the child refuses dinner, the parent negotiates, substitutes, worries. What if they're hungry later? What if it's something I did? Both parents love their children. Both parents are doing what they believe is right. Here's where the research shows the difference. Every time a child faces a small challenge, their nervous system asks a question. Can I handle this? The answer they receive not from words, but from what their parent does begins to wire their brain. A 2014 study from the University of Queensland followed 4,000 children and found that children of overprotective parents showed significantly higher rates of anxiety and lower frustration tolerance by age 7. Not because their parents were harsh, but because their parents had consistently solved problems before the child's brain had the chance to attempt them. Child A, raised with autonomy, learns, discomfort is information. I can move through it. Her prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for problem solving, emotional regulation, and delayed gratification, gets exercise every time she navigates a small difficulty on her own. Child B, raised with constant cushioning, learns, when things go wrong, someone else will fix it. His stress response, cortisol, adrenaline, never fully learns to regulate downward on its own, because regulation always came from outside. Harvard developmental psychologist Jerome Kagan spent decades studying childhood inhibition. His research, extended through longitudinal studies into the 1990s, found that how adults respond to a child's distress in the first 5 years is one of the most significant predictors of that child's capacity for self-regulation as an adult. Not the absence of distress, the response to it. And then there's attachment. The Minnesota longitudinal study of risk and adaptation, which tracked children from infancy into adulthood, found that children with secure attachment, meaning their caregiver was responsive but not anxious, were more curious, more socially competent, and more resilient under stress decades later. The key word is responsive, not preemptive. Attuned to the child's actual need, not to the parent's fear of the need. Child A learns that the world is generally navigable. Her baseline is calm curiosity. Child B learns that the world requires constant management. His baseline is vigilance. Neither child chose their baseline. Both baselines were learned. At 10, Child A is the kid who tries the harder puzzle, who negotiates with a teacher, who falls out with a friend on Friday, and has mostly worked through it by Monday, because she has practice with discomfort, and she knows it passes. Child B at 10 is bright, loved, well cared for, but he hesitates at the edge of things. He checks. He waits for permission that isn't always coming. Small uncertainties feel bigger than they should. At 15, Child A argues with her parents, sometimes badly, but she's learning her own edges. She takes on a part-time job, fails a test, and studies differently next time. Her identity is forming from the inside. At 15, Child B struggles with the gap between how capable he seems and how capable he feels. Socially, he reads rooms quickly. He was always watching adults for cues, but initiating, risking, tolerating the uncertainty of not knowing how something will go, that's harder. The Minnesota data is sobering here. Avoidant attachment patterns established in early childhood showed up clearly in the adult relationships of participants in their 20s and 30s. At 25, Child A doesn't have a perfect life, but she has what researchers call self-efficacy, the deep, embodied belief that her actions can influence her outcomes. It's not optimism, it's something quieter and more durable. At 25, Child B is still learning to trust himself. The love was always there, but somewhere along the way, it arrived a little too fast before he had the chance to learn that he didn't always need rescuing. Most parents are somewhere between these two, not fully autonomous, not fully overprotective, somewhere in the middle, responding differently on different days, in different moods, with different children. The question isn't which category you fall into, it's which direction you want to move in, because the research shows that even small shifts, made consistently, change the trajectory. Shift 1. Wait. 3 seconds. When your child faces a small difficulty, a stuck zipper, a spilled drink, a social awkwardness, pause for 3 seconds before moving. In most cases, they'll begin to handle it. What you're doing in those 3 seconds isn't indifference. You're giving their brain the chance to discover that it works. Shift 2. Match your reaction to their reaction, not your fear. If your child falls and looks at you, your face is their first data point. A calm expression doesn't mean you don't care. It means you trust them to assess. Children take their emotional temperature from their parents. If your face says this is a catastrophe, that becomes their experience of it even when it isn't. Neither of these shifts requires being a different kind of parent. They just require a moment of awareness about where the protection is actually landing. Both children in this story are loved. But love, without awareness of how it lands in a child's nervous system, sometimes looks different from the inside than it does from the outside. To one child, a parent rushing over every time she stumbles feels like safety. To another, it slowly starts to feel like, you don't think I can do this. Neither child says this out loud, but the nervous system keeps score. Which of these two patterns do you recognize most in your own upbringing? Tell me in the comments.